Hey, welcome back to the channel. Today I have a cool tutorial for you guys to follow. Hopefully it's not too complicated. I'm actually going to provide you with a raw image that I took of the product so you guys can follow along the tutorial. In this tutorial we're going to use Photoshop and Adobe After Effects. I'm using Lightroom, but I use it just to archive my images, so you don't have to actually have Lightroom, just Photoshop and After Effects. Today we're going to be going to the steps I take when I'm editing a photo for Instagram, for example, a product photo in this case. But I'm going to take this tutorial a bit further. I'm actually going to create a cinemagraph with that single still image. And we can loop this in, for example, Instagram, and it will look quite cool because it's a still image. It looks like a still image, but the logo of the product will be breathing. In this case, we're using this new headset I just got for gaming, and it's actually quite cool. It's well designed, the sound is okay, the mic quality is very good. So I said, why not do a product shoot, get a tutorial with that, and still enjoy my product. Without further ado, let's jump into the tutorial, and I hope it's easy to follow and that you guys learn something cool today. So the first thing we're going to do today is we're going to open the file in Lightroom. Once you import your photos to Lightroom, you could make changes maybe in the exposure, a few bits. I corrected a bit the shadows, I think it was a bit dark. The big changes we're going to actually do in Photoshop. The reason I use Lightroom is because Lightroom keeps all my files organized. So I know I can come back to the libraries for a particular shoot and they will be there. So this is how it's gonna look at the end. So I went ahead and deleted the strings, I went ahead and deleted the cable, and I corrected a bit where the strings were kind of cushioning here in the back. I corrected the shadows and stuff, and also I corrected a bit of the reflection here. You can see it's gone here in the final product. Once you have your image in Lightroom, you're gonna right click, edit in Adobe Photoshop 21. I'm not going to click it, I already have it open just for the sake of saving time. So this is the actual file that is imported from Lightroom. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to correct the strings. So I'm going to go ahead here in the bottom right and create a new layer, empty layer. I'm going to make sure I'm selecting that layer, and I'm going to go to the healing brush tool. I'm going to use the classic one. I'm not going to use the spot brush healing tool, and we're going to hold Alt and scroll, and this will allow us to zoom into the image. So once we're zooming into the image, we're going to go ahead and change the size of our tool, and we're going to click Alt, click somewhere close to the string to take a sample of that, and you're going to begin moving down, and as magic the string will disappear. So once we are happy that the string is gone, I'm probably going to rename this layer just so I know what is in it. And then we're going to go ahead and move on to delete the cable. I particularly don't like the cable. You can leave it if it doesn't bother you, but I'm going to go ahead and delete the cable. So I'm going to go ahead and do a new layer, the same as before. We're going to call this cable. And we're going to click on our layer, make sure we still have our healing brush tool selected. And again, we're going to zoom in, and we're going to sample an area that covers the actual cable size. Sample close to the area we're going to target, and then begin editing. That might be a bit small, so I'm going to sample a big one so I don't leave any blemishes behind. Sample here, this is all gone. So in this case, this is going to be a bit tricky because of this curvature here. So what I might do is I could potentially cut a section here and then move it, and that might work. I could sample the corner. I'm going to actually create a new layer just in case I'm going to call it cable edge, just so I know that I can come back to this change if it's not working correctly for what I want to do. I'm going to put a size for my sample, so I'm going to click Alt, click, and that's my sample. And you can see that there's a slight rotation. That might work, but it probably won't do a very good job. So that's not going to work for me. So I'm going to go back, and that's the reason I created this layer. So I can go back and not lose anything. I could just delete this layer if that's something I want to do, but this layer is empty now. So we're going to try something else here. We're going to actually try with our lasso tool, and we're going to try to make a selection of the area we want to kind of fix. It should be all around here. So once I have the selection, I'm just going to move it. I know that's the size of the selection I want. I'm going to move it around this side, and then I'm going to click layer via copy with the right click. I'm going to move that to the top, and I am going to select that layer, and I'm going to move it all the way here. So I'm going to rotate it a little bit until it kind of roughly fits the area I want it to fit. So once I have my selection in the position I want it, I'm going to create a mask. I'm going to select the layer, and I'm going to put my brush to flow 100, smoothing 100, and I'm just going to go and draw around the edge. So that's looking a bit better. There's still a slight gap there. What I'm going to do is create a new layer, brush healing tool again, and sample current and below. Now we need to fix that kind of shadow that we have here. So we could do the same with our new layer selected. We can Alt, select the source point, and we can go in the edge. Okay, once I'm kind of happy with that, I think that's working great now. One last step I'm gonna do is I'm gonna actually go to my eyedropper and make sure I have a sample size of 5 by 5. We don't want to have point sample, which is the default. Point sample will select only one color, one pixel. So if you select sample 5 by 5 or even 3 by 3, you're selecting the average color of 5 pixels across. So that generally gives you smoother brush transitions if you're using color, you know. Once you're in brush, you can go and select Alt, click, and you select sample area. You select the sample area. Make sure smoothing is down very, very, very low, and flow very, very low. I'm gonna go 10 and 20. We're gonna try that a bit and make sure that they were doing, yeah, slow changes, small changes. You're gonna select sample area, and then what you're doing is basically diffusing that transition there and making it more smooth. You can take all the time in the world doing this, making sure your kind of selection is as smooth as possible. For the sake of the tutorial, I'm gonna leave it there. And we have 2 big steps done. So the first one was removing the nylon suspension. Second one's removing the cables, which are kind of relatively easy changes that you can make. Now, I don't know if you can see it, but here there is a line from the background I used. That's where both backgrounds intercept. I'm gonna zoom in, you might be able to see it here. I'm gonna go ahead and create another layer. I'm just gonna call it background line, and I'm gonna clean that line. Again, same tool as before, healing brush tool, select a sample somewhere close to where the edge is, I might actually put it a bit bigger because it's not fully selecting the whole thing. There we go. Now that's working better. At this point, you could collapse some of this, merge some of these layers. There's no need to really go back to the cables or this cable. If you wanted to, you can leave it. At this point, it would be a nice idea to group all these edits, and then you can continue working on other edits, like correcting here or correcting this big sections. So I am gonna create a new layer. I'm gonna call this reflection, and we're gonna work on the reflection here. So this one was a bit tricky. You can see the table clock here reflected on the headphone because it had like a shiny surface. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna clean this with the brush tool. Make sure selection layer selected, flow at 10, smoothing at 100, and we're gonna click Alt to select the sample area, and I'm gonna sample from this. I'm gonna begin from the top down, and I'm gonna just begin drawing until I have those lines gone. Once you're done with your painting, you're going to select the reflection layer, and you can kind of play around with the opacity. So that's 0%. This is halfway. So I think I'm going to leave it somewhere around 87%, just to make it a bit more natural. So once that's done, we're going to move on to a new area. We're going to try to fix these issues here that were caused by the fishing line being strapped to the kind of headphone top. So we're going to create a new layer. We're going to zoom in a little bit here, and what we're going to do here is a bit different. I'm actually going to make a copy of the area and move it on top. So this one might be a bit tricky to do. What we're going to do is patch healing tool. We're going to try this. This might not work. Source content aware. That's going to be the one. Okay, so we have one kind of selected. So I'm going to try something different here for the pad. I'm going to actually get my lasso tool, and I'm going to select maybe this area. I'm going to actually select here, layer via copy. Where is my copy? I'm going to put that to the top, on top of pad. I'm going to select that layer. I'm going to move that around here to roughly where I want it. I'm going to probably rotate this a little bit. Okay, that might work. And then I'm going to click warp, and I'm going to stretch it until it kind of fits where I wanted it to be. Try not to stretch it too much so it doesn't distort the whole thing too badly. Okay, that should kind of work. Yeah, that should work. Then I can fix this other bits with the cloning tool or some other way. I'm going to try to fix this edge here, but I want to make sure that I flatten all the effects that I've done into one layer. So I'm going to flatten that. I know that I'm not going to be going back from this. I'm going to flatten this, turn that on and off. It's not too bad. It could be a bit better, but for the sake of the tutorial, I think I'm going to move on I have all my adjustments in a separate layer now. This is going to be displayed in Instagram, so you won't be zooming in that area too much. But obviously, if you want to do this, you take more time, and the more time you take, you can get better results. All the big stuff is done. I'm going to actually clean a little bit of this. Again, new layer, brush healing tool. I'm going to select my samples area. I'm going to put the size of this smaller sample area, and I'm going to clean all those tiny spots. Okay, I think that's good enough for me. Might try to fix these bits here. And turn on and off. And we're gonna check this section out. Turn on and off. That looks good. We are moving on to the last step of this tutorial. So you could actually just export this image, and that's a final product. I actually saved the image already, and I'm going to take this an extra step further. I'm going to create a cinemagraph, and we're going to now have to select the logo, and then we're going to save the Photoshop file with the layers so we can edit them in After Effects and make the animation for the color. So once I know all those corrections are made, I'm gonna one last time select all the images, merge layers. Now we're gonna go and select the logo to separate it in a separate layer that we can then apply an effect in After Effects. Select curvature pen tool. Select all the path, and we're gonna make a selection of all that. Layer via copy. We have our layer there. It's not the best selection, but it works. It will work for what we're looking for. We're gonna call this logo. And then we're gonna create one last one. I'm gonna call this one glow. In the glow one, I'm gonna select my brush tool. I'm gonna select big size, big enough size, and I'm gonna click I and select the color that I'm gonna make the glow. And that's what's gonna be it. I'm gonna click once, maybe twice, and that is it. I think that's probably too small. I'm actually gonna create a bigger one just to exaggerate a bit the effect. One, maybe a small one. Click twice. Okay, so that's my glow. Now we're all set in Photoshop. We have our image cleaned, we have our logo selection, and we have our glow selection. So once this is done, we're gonna hit save. Once that's save, I'm gonna actually save as now, because that's right now it's a TIFF file that is on my Lightroom. So I'm gonna save as, and I'm gonna go to the folder I'm working on, tutorial file, and I'm gonna make sure I'm selecting a Photoshop file. I'm gonna select that and save. Once that's saved, we're gonna actually, I'm gonna quit this just to save some memory on my computer. I'm gonna open After Effects, import file, and we've called this tutorial file. Make sure we're gonna import composition, retain layer sizes. I'm gonna import, and then editable layers. You don't want to merge them. We're gonna editable layers. We want the layers to come as 3 different layers. We're gonna click the composition called tutorial file, and this is what it is. I'm gonna make this composition 30 seconds long, 25 frames a second. That's fine with me. The resolution, depending where you're gonna use this file, I'm gonna use it on Instagram, so I'm actually gonna lower the resolutions just so the computer works a bit easier. I know for a fact that 1080 by 1350 is the aspect ratio Instagram likes, so I'm gonna create that. I'm actually gonna connect this one to this one and connect to the background, so when I scale this, they all stay in place. Okay, so what I did there is just create the composition, the size I'm gonna actually be exporting, just so the computer doesn't struggle too much. It took me a bit to figure out what the actual length for the loop would be. So the loop is gonna be 4 seconds, so you can see the logo passing through all the colors. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply one effect to both layers, and it's going to be hue and saturation. So I'm going to pre-compose this layer. I'm going to call that logo plus glow. Pre-compose that layer, cut it back to 4 seconds, select that layer and apply the hue and saturation effect. So I'm going to make sure I'm at the beginning here, and I'm going to hit the stopwatch once. I'm going to scroll to 4 seconds, and I'm going to rotate this until it hits 360. So that's going to allow the logo and the glow to change hue. So we have that 4 second now loop. I'm going to go and extend this all the way to the end for 30 seconds, and I'm going to duplicate this layer, hitting Ctrl D, and I'm going to stagger them. And there we have our file. I might actually just delete that last one so my loop finishes precisely where the color goes back to the beginning. So when Instagram plays this file, it will loop from that point onwards. I'm gonna close here, select this layer, end it there, and I'm gonna trim comb to work area. That's exactly what we wanted. Okay, so now I'm gonna play that back. That seems to be working. Maybe we could potentially make the logo glow maybe a bit bigger, so we'll duplicate that layer and we'll go back to tutorial file. Let's see if that makes it a bit more exaggerated. Yeah, there we go. And we could actually get one of them, logo glow and scale. Scale, maybe that's too much. We'll see now. Yeah, I actually like that. So that's it. We have that animation. It's working correctly. So one last thing I'm gonna do is the colors are seem to be a bit bleached out compared to how it looked in Photoshop. So I'm gonna go and add a lumetri effect to my background layer, and I'm going to increase saturation to 130. No, maybe that's too much. 120. 120 works for me. I think that's decent colors. One last thing, I think there's a lot of empty space down here, so I'm going to go and select everything. And I'm gonna pair it to the background, and I'm gonna scale this a little bit more, and I'm gonna reposition it in the center of the frame. Remember, this is a very high resolution image, so this cropping in won't affect the quality of it at all. Okay, I'm happy with that now. That's taking more of my overall frame. Once that's done, we're almost ready to go. We're gonna click Control M. So then once I'm in the render queue, I'm gonna queue in media encoder so I can render straight away an H.264 file. If I render from here, I can render a QuickTime or an AVI file, but I don't want that. I just want a file that I can upload to Instagram straight away. So I'm clicking in queue in Adobe Media Encoder, and there I have my encoder settings from Premiere, which allows you to render H.264 file. We're gonna click here, preset. I am gonna make sure H.264 is the format. I'm gonna make sure the resolution is the one I want for Instagram, 1080, 350. Use maximum render quality, render at maximum depth. To pass. And I'm gonna put this 20. It's gonna give me a 72 megabytes file. I'm gonna make sure that the file is selected in the folder I want and render that file. Hey, glad to see that you made it to the end of the tutorial. Hopefully you got to recreate this image and the cinemagraph and you're happy with the results. If you have any questions, drop me a comment below and I'll do my best to answer and help you guys if you're stuck in one of the steps. As always, thanks for watching. If you're new here, please consider subscribing to the channel. It helps a lot. If you're subscribed already, well done. Pat yourself in the back and I'll see you in the next tutorial. Thank you.